It indicates that Athens has a very mild winter, so temperatures below freezing point are very rare. Otherwise, citrus trees lining the streets. The wooden part and the metal, nails and so on, were carefully taken out. They are poor people, they are not wealthy people. Doors, windows, everything that can be reused. And then it's brought down here. Yet the city is not here today. Eliminated from stream water. So what you do here is you look for underground rivers, or like here, what the ancient Greeks have done was that you had this rock, the Glaucia rock, and there is a channel from behind that they were filling up the tank, the water reservoir, so that you could come. That is needed, and you get the rest. And if you see the head, it usually comes from a different piece.
And you said they change every year?
How else do you think we date Paul? Actually, the whole life of Paul is dated from his visit in Corinth.
Is that right?
Because the only person we can date is Gallium, the proconsul of Corinth. So here we have the two things that we can, in the museum, that we can attribute them to the synagogue of the city of Corinth. They were found in the village during salvage excavation, material in second use, we call it here. I told you what they were doing with their own houses. Basically, every stone that could be used is used in something else afterwards. So here we have it. This is the capital of Olymont. And we have the Menoas over here. And then over there, Avoyi Evra. So it's the end of the word synagogue, and the beginning of the word Hebrew in Greek. The only thing about this inscription up on the top is that it's after Paul's time. We can date that from the way the letters are written. But it's the historical proof of having a synagogue in the city of Corinth. Like Greeks, nudity for the ancient Greeks is a sign of divinity. So when you see someone, and the Romans, as they're developing, they're becoming more Greekified, you would say, in their education and everything, they adopt a lot of the Greek things. So when you see someone like that, it indicates that he's a god, a young god, or a young hero, or a dead person, heroified. And these are two of the sons and the grandsons of August. The difference between the Greeks and the Romans is that their heads are portraits. Columns and capitals of columns in stone. Then it's the Ionic, the one that has the scrolls on the side. And then we have the different variations of the Corinthian capital, where you have the leaves of a plant coming out of a canthus. The Corinthian capital is attributed to a Corinthian sculptor.
We're walking out into the Agora.
Excuse me.
It's all right, I'm wanting to get everybody.
So we know his brother, we have the correspondence between the two of them. Gallio stays here for a year only, then he goes back to Rome, he's back in favor with the emperor. For someone so close to the imperial family, being here, it shows it's sort of a disfavor. Just kick him out of the capital, teach him a lesson, and then go back in. We have a letter of his surviving to the Emperor Claudius in Delphi, where he's asking the emperor help because Corinth is a big city with a very small population, and it's very hard for him to maintain the long walls and all the public buildings. And he needs and he's asking from the emperor help to try to persuade more people to come and settle permanently, not just be here for the festival or, you know, for the commerce, to have, you know, tax-paying local. Well,
Y'all ready? After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. And because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. And when Gallio was the deputy of Achaia, the Jews made insurrection with one accord against Paul, and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, This fellow persuadeth men to worship God contrary to the law. And when Paul was now about to open his mouth, Gallio said unto the Jews, If it were a matter of wrong or wicked lewdness, O ye Jews, reason would that I should bear with you. But if it be a question of words and names and of your law, look ye to it, for I will be no judge of such matters. And he drave them from the judgment seat. Then all the Greeks took Sosthenes, the chief ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat, and Gallio cared for none of those things.
The name of a poem, but it's a singing poem. In the Roman times, the theater, that we're going to go down there, is usually converted into an arena for gladiators. And that's why the one that they were taking pictures of the reliefs of the theater in the museum, they are the labors of Hercules, which has nothing to do with Dionysus and the god of wine, who is also the god of theater. But Hercules is the god that protects gladiators. In the Roman time, theater is for the educated elite. So theatrical performances start also to be performed to the Odeon. That for the Greeks initially it was just for the singing performances. Now we're going to go down there to see it's open, where it's roped off, the inscription.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier the fort.
Yes.
You can get an idea from here of where the fort was?
Yes, the fort was where it's the big factory down there.
Yes, ma'am.
Just
this side.
Just this side of the factory. Yes. Just
This is the entrance into the theater area.
unlike the fort of Keftea, it's another type of fort. The fort of
We're now going down to the theater area. This is again going down into the theater area, and there's where the inscription of Erastus is at. The inscription of Erastus.
that which have made the contrast between the stone and the color, the yellow, the color of the brass, you know, just the metal. And that would make it also standing in the use, because people will just walk over it. This is the entrance into the theater. Why would you like to have your name there? Less expensive also, yeah. Why would you like to have their name there?
Church greets you. Erastus, the treasurer of the city, greets you, and Quartus, a brother.
And Erastus is down here.
Will you read that?
Myself, sorry. Because I have to read it in Latin, it's not a short poem. Crowds, so they just throw in
This
things
is Roman
or
theater.
want to get into the arena to clear things up here.
Here at Corinth.
Yes, you can step. You can step anywhere. Athenian ever. He built this modular to replace the older one that by that time was no longer in use. 5,000 seating capacity. The stage building is as it was discovered. The Cavea was redone in the 1950s. It's one of the venues of the Athens Festival. And my reproduction think that's what it would have looked like in antiquity, because there was a timber roof. Pausanias tells us about the cost of the roof. They were just making them when he was here. Until that time there was a sort of a ramp that was bringing you up here, at least in the middle. So it was not white, it would have been a much more colorful result. On the left hand side here is the Pinakotheke. The Pinakotheke means the place with the paintings, and it's not an art gallery. It was decorated with paintings, but it was a restaurant. It's the official dining place. Don't say. It's 10 miles. He comes to Athens from Berea. He lands on the coastline. A lot of people say in Piraeus, archaeologists think most probably he landed somewhere close to your hotel. Because that was and then he walked into Athens. In Athens, he discusses down in the Agora. I'll just tell you the historical things of the time. Athens at the time is no longer the great city of the past. It's more like a university.
Verses 16 through 29 for Paul's sermon here. That's much water in my eyes. I can see her.
They're on my feet. So?
Now while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in them when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogues with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and Stoics encountered him, and some said, "What will this babbler say?" Other some, he seemed to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to Archippus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We know therefore what these things mean." For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. And Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "Ye man of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worship with man's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all such things, and hath made one blood of all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bonds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Forasmuch then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is likened to gold or silver or stone, graven by art and man's device.
Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with the inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship. Him declare I unto you. God that made the world and all things, and he anything, seeing he giveth to all life, breath, all things. Made one blood, all nations of men found all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they may seek the Lord, if haply though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As certain also of your own poets have said, we are also his offspring. For as much then as God, or as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that God is like gold or silver or stone, graven by art, hands device. This now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, that he hath raised him from the dead.
Finally, I just thought, no, it's going on too long.
Otherwise, even your first return.
Every Monday or Tuesday for the last
We stay with
It's been advisories.
Alright, the last song of Beatles. Alright. Here we go. Oh, mamma mia.
Ticket to ride.
Ticket to Ride! A big round of applause for Tennessee. Mark from Tennessee. Ladies, you have to wake up. Ladies, do we have ladies in? Where she came from. This is what I see through running.
Ruby Tuesday?
Ruby Tuesday! Who's the singer? Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, bravo, Tennessee. Alright. For the first time since I do this game, yes I know.
Yes, give the hearts.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for the gentlemen! They are big musicians, bravo Uruguay. You have so many hits already. He's our Olympic champion. You have also so many hits. And one more for you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one announcement. We are going to wait now, and after we are going to this.
Estamos ya
acercando a la isla de Siros y vamos a atracar a la isla de Siros dentro de aproximadamente 45 minutos a las.
We're at the island of Syros. We docked here instead of Mykonos due to the wind. Well, we're walking toward a Greek Orthodox church. We're at the Greek Orthodox Church on Syros. Walking down the street back toward the ship. on the shoreline of Syros. There's our ship. Next to it, a very nice yacht. And you can see the shops that line the coastline here. Looks a lot like Mykonos. Not as many of the white houses.
A certain amount of garlic every day to keep the food. Area was all underground when they first came here for the excavation. George, what were all these on either side? And the columns you see here. Shops, shops, shops. And the columns today they came from Nashville, from years ago. People did not come here to see the archaeological site. This was not an archaeological site 2,000 years ago. They came from all over to visit Temple of the Did you all take the picture here? Well, it's outside. You're sure? I want to make sure everybody takes the picture. Okay. Now, we start walking. Right after the there was a terrible fire. This column, there's only one column left. Soon I will give you some time to go inside. Can everybody hear me? I want everybody closer to me, please. Don't miss this point.
Where you won't want to go?
What's your best seat, sir?
All right. Okay. Well then, here's the thing to do.
They heard this, they were baptized in the name of the Lord Jesus. And when Paul had laid his hands on them. The Holy Spirit came upon them, and they spoke in new tongues and prophesied. Now the men were about 12 in all. He went into the synagogue and spoke.
Here we are. See those? Following my finger? Not to feel it. Did you like it? Do we have guests who have not seen the actual weaving performance? Can I give brief? Hoş geldiniz. Well, dear guests, this is the kind of loom weavers would work in front of, and they are mostly given patterns like this. They are graphed, and they follow them row by row. I mean, they count the colors. And after the spinning and dyeing processes, they first place those vertical warp threads on the loom, and they'll make the foundation. And they're placed in a V shape. Half will stand at the front and the other half at the back. And to make
Give you some kind of idea of how the ship is rocking. This is what the swimming pool is doing. Whoa. This is at the Venetian Fortress.
We're having fun, baby. We're having so much fun.
We're on top of the ship looking at the island of Santorini. It's really, really windy up here. If you look, you can see BJ being blown around. Robert and Emily. Here comes our tender boats. They take us up to here. We're about to ride the carts to the top.
I was going to say, this here sounds a little bouncier than I expected.
Well, here we go.
Are we going to bounce again?
I don't want to look down.
You don't like heights?
I'm fine.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, this is good. Wow. Yeah, that's much faster than my donkey.
Are those the roads the donkeys use? Oh, wow.
Look and see where a donkey's at.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one. It's like, no.
Oh my God, out there, donkey rides, donkey rides.
Yeah.
Only 10 minutes.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that.
This would be a good one for the wide angle. I tried taking a picture of that owl.
Oops.
We're looking at the theater at Colossae. Much better condition than many had suggested. To give you some perspective, this is the road that runs by the ruins. And now we gotta go take a picture of the This is the Hotel Colossae, Thermal Hotel. We are in Hierapolis, at the foot of the mountains. It's rather cool this morning.
Condition, and to lay some wreaths, some flowers on certain days. But it seems like this system collapsed as well after the city was abandoned after 8th century, so that they broke into every single one of those tombs. And some people ask me sometimes the question, why here the biggest number of tombs? There might be different guesses. Well, guesses simply. The first one is that, this was a highly populated city, and they happened to be in different ways of burial, so that might be another thing. But you need to understand the fact that even 2,000 years ago, this was a center for health, tourism. So it seems like many of the Romans, at a certain age, they knew of the fame of the curing waters of Hierapolis, these hot thermals. So that could have been one of the reasons why it could be a place for some Romans to come when they get retired or when they got sick. And it seems like these waters were not magical, so it didn't work for everyone. So many people passed away here. And one other thing which might be interesting to know, you know that St. Philip was martyred here, one of the apostles. He was, well, as I told you, some scholars do say that he was crucified, some do say that he was hanged upside down on a tree and stoned to death. But many Christians could have wanted to be buried somewhere near to the holy person, because many of those tombs would have the sign of a cross. So that shows us that many of them were Christians, actually, from early Christian era. The missionary activities in this region was quite successful in the 2nd, 3rd centuries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to be really very careful getting off the bus and going across.
We are at Hierapolis, photo op site. Little park at the foot.
Just under the soil, but still though you can see the walls. So this is the enlarged, very late Roman era, 5th century AD walls of the city. And one of us is just standing by the gate.
The walls of the city and the gate.
To the city from the late Roman sports exercises when they were naked. So the place where you're naked became the school building. So you call it gym. Thanks God we're not naked when we're working out. We'll keep walking. I don't want to tell you about the same buildings in the different ancient sites. We are going to see a much bigger gymnasium when we go to Sardis today in the afternoon. Today, right now, I just would like to tell you that this is the remains of the gymnasium, which was a school building that included some working out as well, some sports. But I'll tell you more when we go to the other ancient city Sardis, because you're going to see a much bigger one.
Remnants of the gymnasium.
You're out of the soil, but that's all about it.
There's the theater. We're walking along the main road here. This is where one building would be right after another. White calcium deposits.
It would have an algae, because of the algae that it has, with a bit of sunshine, it looks in light turquoise kind of color. So that makes it look so spectacular. When we didn't have this many tourists, and when we didn't have the chance of losing this place, not chance, but the possibility of losing this place, they had so many tourists to walk in and swim in those. So in some old postcards you can see that. But today, tourists are not allowed to walk wherever they wish to. There's a certain path arranged for the tourists. To be able to do that, you have to take off your shoes. There are some guards at the top who watch the tourists. When you hear the whistle, please. You may take a seat here if you wish to. We are all here. As I said, I wanted to talk about the history in front of this plan. This shows us what it looked like in around 3rd century AD when the population was around 150,000. And Christian population getting bigger and bigger. It's because on many 2nd, 3rd century AD tombs you could see signs, crosses. And well, we are, as I told you, right in the center. We are somewhere around here, and therefore when you just look back in the distance you can see the theater. There is a tree on our way, but right behind the tree a bit to the right we've got the theater building over there. When it comes to the history of this city, well, we know for sure that in around 3rd century BC the city was founded. There are a couple of different ideas about where the name comes from, Hierapolis. Some do say that it was the name of the wife of the founder of the city, a lady called Hera, a city called Hierapolis, which means the city of Hera. But at the same time, it could mean the holy city. Hiero means holy in ancient Greek. And as the population got bigger and bigger in time, the city was expanding, like the city walls, you remember, were put back in 5th century AD. We had, after it was founded as a city of the Hellenistic kingdom by the Antiochus, we know that it came under the rule of the Roman Empire, and this was one of the favorite cities by the Romans. They had the imperial cult here. We know that in 1st century the city suffered from earthquakes, and the city was rebuilt with the money provided by the emperor himself. And so that's a good sign that the city was quite important for them. It was built on a fertile land. You remember we got all these Lycus River, Lycus Valley. the rivers around, and it was on. There are different regions you remember I was talking about. We've got Phrygia, we got Galatia, to the south we got Pamphylia, and Galatia as well. And this city was quite close to the trade route. That's why both the city of Laodicea and this city became quite rich in time. It's because they are quite close to the trade routes linking different regions. And we know that after the Roman era, well, Christianity was spread quite fast here. I can say that this was a Christian city in 6th century, without any doubt. And after being destroyed by different earthquakes in different centuries, finally after 8th century, as they started to have the Arab raids, we know that there were very few number of people living on top of the hill here, and especially after the arrival of Turks in 11th century, they settled down the valley in the city of Denizli. So we can say that it was totally abandoned at that time. 8th century, maybe few number of people, 11th century, almost no one living up here. Most possibly some of the stones were recycled for the construction of the new city down the hill. Therefore, there's not much standing. The reason why there's not much standing is mainly the earthquakes, but even those that you can find most possibly were recycled. You could have found were recycled for the constructions of the new cities. There are a couple of interesting things about this city that I'd like to tell you about. Well, the first big structure that you could see on the way was the theater. The theater had to be built in the Hellenistic era when the city was built in 3rd century. But after this population got so big and after the Roman era, the Roman kind of architecture for the theaters, this is one other thing that I may tell you about maybe on the bus on a long ride, would be different than the ancient Greek theaters. So they remodeled their theater and they enlarged their theater by the time of Septimus Severus, 3rd century Roman emperor. And after that time, after he came here, the seating capacity of the theater reached up to 20,000 people. And today it's under restoration, so there's this big crane and everything by the temple. This structure right behind you, we just walked past by it, is an ancient Roman bath. Again, in one other city, I'd like to tell you more about the Roman bath. I don't know if you went to do the Roman bath when you were in Ephesus. I may tell you about the engineering, all the traditions, but it was just falling apart, and they have found after the recent excavation, some statues. So by building a modern roof on top of one building of this Roman bath, they turned it into a museum. And I can say that there are only a few statues. I must say that I've been to the United States. No offense, there are great museums, but when it comes to this kind of antiquity, something in Metropolitan Museum exhibited right in the middle of the room could be just lying in a courtyard of a museum for us here. I mean, we've got the abundance of all these sarcophagi, of these statues and everything that you'll be able to see actually even just walking that way like all the other people over there. On your right in its courtyards, you're going to see some beautiful capitals of pillars that are having some beautiful reliefs like bull heads and lions and things like that on it. Even just that would be enough. You'll not be missing because the area of the exhibition is so small. So you can easily skip that one. I would highly recommend you to follow all these people and walk straight. I don't know if you can see the Turkish flag over there. There are 2 Turkish flags and a little arch gateway. Cleopatra Pool. You remember I told you about this yesterday. It's not something made for the tourists. It's been that way for hundreds of years. That right behind that motel, there was a huge fountain. The water came from that mountain, the hot thermal waters. So that, it just runs down through the terraces, which is just behind us, that way. In the Roman cities, I always feel like taking people to different Roman cities in Asia Minor. These Romans had only one engineer and one architect. It's the same system in all the cities. So you've got one main fountain from where the city would be distributed to different parts of the city. And they had that fountain right in front of the Apollo temple. The main god of the city was Apollo. And that's the oldest building that we still have the remains of from 1st century BC, although the city is older. So both the temple and the fountain after the earthquakes collapsed, but the water was still coming down to that area, and that little pool in front of the fountain turned into a pool with some Roman pillars lying in it. It's still that way, so you can see some people swimming in it, because we've got that motel building over there where they do provide some changing rooms for people. Even this early in the morning, you can see some people, no matter how cold the weather is, you can always see some tourists swimming in it. And when you go there, you just have to walk straight in. You don't have to pay to walk around. There's a little cafe, and there are the restrooms. So if you feel like you need to go to the restrooms, you just have to walk straight, go through that arch gateway. If you'd like to see the pool, walk straight, and a bit to your right, there's going to be a little bridge over the pool. So from there you can take great photos. But if you'd like to use the restrooms, go straight in through the arch gateway and turn to your left. The restrooms will be on your left. And to go to the travertines, to go to the terraces, you just need to go there. You can see all that crowd just standing. That's the place where you must take off your shoes. You may even leave your shoes over there. Just walk down, I don't know, maybe 50 yards max, and then walk back the same way. And if anyone is planning to do that, not many people seemed eager to do that actually. No one wants to get their feet wet. Please be careful. I mean, if someone changes, his or her mind. So please be careful. It's because it's really very slippery. Even if you're not planning to walk down that way to take great photos of the overhanging pools that way. One other interesting thing is that way actually. You can see it from a distance when you are walking to the antique pool because it's going to be to your left. There they've got the main avenue of the city, the colonnaded street. Colonnaded street had some shops on the side, but we're going to see the same thing in Laodicea. And at the very end of it, there was a monumental gate within the city, named after the proconsul of the city, Julius Frontinus. 2 propylons, 2 towers, 2-storied, second floors of them just collapsed in time. That is 1st century as well. So, as I told you, there is so much if you consider this so much, but after seeing places like Ephesus, where you can see temples and everything re-erected, I generally tell people that rather than the archaeological side as the natural beauty and that antique pool being the main highlights for this place. The last interesting thing, unfortunately, fortunately they have closed the entrance of it. In this city there was a place, according to ancient historians from 1st century, there was some gas coming out of a kind of a cave. And they were faithful pagan people believing in Zeus and all those gods and goddesses. They believed that the only people who would not be killed from that gas would be the priest of Cybele. That is the mother goddess of earth. That's an important goddess of this region. They say even the birds flying over that cave would fall dead. Cows passing by it would fall dead. I'm glad that I could have seen the documentary. A Turkish, he was the owner of this Turkish documentary TV channel. With some scientists, he walked into the cave. And they had all these gadgets to measure all the gas and everything that they got in the cave. After you walk down like 6 feet, there is a smell of sulfur and all that, but the real thing is there is lack of oxygen. So that it is true, scientific fact that if you go into the cave, as there is lack of oxygen, if you don't make your way out in a short time, you're going to go unconscious first and then die because of lack of oxygen. So they called it back then plutonium. Because the god of underground world, god of death, is Hades in Greek, but Pluto in Latin. So as it calls people to death, they called it plutonium. This is a bit risky to keep it open for tourists. That's why they block the entrance of it. But we got one other thing that you can read in any guidebook about the city, and that is plutonium. Well, I'd like to give you from now on some free time. If you wish to, we may walk all together. First to take some photos of the terraces over there. And then I'd say the highlights is the antique pools. And on the way you can see the colonnaded area in the distance. And to remind you, the necropolis is just a couple of miles that way. You remember the cemetery. One thing I forgot to tell you, on top of that hill we've got the remains of another building. That is Martyrion of St. Philip. I was just mentioning on the way one of the apostles was martyred here in this city, and centuries after his time, as I told you, in 6th century, this was a Christian city. I mean, there was not the Christian population, the pagan population. It was a predominantly Christian city. And after 5th century, it's believed that they built a martyrion up there. But today it is very difficult to get up there, as there had to be a bridge over there. I've seen the ruins of it. It collapsed. It's not an easy path to walk. So that's one other interesting thing about Hierapolis. So, shall we walk down that way so you can take your photos, and then we can go to the antique pool?
Yeah, go ahead. The water hot?
It's warm. Definitely warm. Look at the steam.
These are the pools of Cleopatra. Photo of the theater. And in front here, the Temple of Apollo. And then between these two, at the distance, is the Martyrium Philip. We're back at the entrance. Our group's going to get on the bus. The last are walking in here. Here's the modern looking awning and the gift shops.
I just would like to show you one interesting decoration on this pillar. That's the reason why I just brought here at first before I took you to the temple. If you come a bit closer, you're going to see an interesting graffiti, an ancient graffiti on this pillar. I was telling you that the Christianity was spread quite fast here, and when you read the Revelation, you could see that certain churches, like Philadelphia and Smyrna, they actually represented the strength of the church. So the church of Smyrna and Philadelphia was not criticized that much, but I gotta say that Laodicea is not one of those cities. So there's so much to be criticized about the city. And I was telling you about the existence of the Jewish people. It's a banking city, it's a trade center and all that. So it should not be surprising to have Jews around here. And there were. If you come a bit closer, you're going to see a menorah here. Can you see the arms of a menorah here on this graffiti? And there is the cross on top of it. So from the menorah came a cross on top, and this looks like a kind of an arm. It looks like this. Right? That's the only connection that I have to that. And you know that he was not necessarily welcomed in those synagogues. In most of the places he had the danger of being stoned. And in some places, as Jesus told his apostles that they had to shake off the dust of their feet and leave, and he had to do it in Asia Minor, here as well. But it seems like after Christianity became quite dominant here, they had a graffiti like this. To go back, maybe you can do your, because the theater is not in good condition here, you can do your reading here as well, and then we can walk fast around the ancient city to be able to see everything. I just would like to remind you one other thing. When you go through the scripture, you will actually easily remember that this is the city famous for being rich. All the other cities after earthquakes, after being destroyed by earthquakes, they needed to get the money from the Roman emperor to have their cities rebuilt. This city said, no, we don't need it. So that's a very good sign that, you know, we can rebuild our city after all our cities destroyed by an earthquake.
Chapter 3, beginning with verse 14. And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thy eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in unto him, and will sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me on my throne, even as I overcome and am set down with my Father in his throne.
Wow, this is just so amazing.
Laodicea, tis patridos. It's like fathers, but actually it means at the same time the motherland. And demos, like democracy. That's the other thing. Popular People's Assembly. So, the Popular People's Assembly of the nation and the City Council of Laodicea have this erected, but I can't read this one. That I don't know. Just do you believe that in around 2nd century AD the script could have been used either like a treasury or like an archive for this place? For sure, in 4th century AD, they used it.
Let me see the other.
In other places, I can tell you this is a temple of Apollo, this is a temple of Zeus, this is a temple of Artemis. But for this one, unfortunately, archaeologists have not said anything. So I can't say Zeus, Artemis, Apollo. They call it, there's a sign by the entrance, they call it Temple A. So that's the name of it for now. But after more excavations, if they can find a few statues of the same deity, maybe they can call it the temple of one of those got by the king Antiochus in 3rd century BC, and it became really very rich between 1st and 3rd century. After again,
and then we move, and you can see in the distance, you can see Hierapolis.
You can grab onto the fence. You stand right here, and I'm going to go down.
There's a building in Melbourne where the 87th floor, rather, it's 88th floor, so 87th floor, you can stand down on the glass thing. And
This is the way to do a dig, where you can see it, but not mess it up.
Oh, you're fine. Just trying to get it before I get him in this column. Alrighty, so one more. Let me get one more.
Until the water up or down, so that the source of the water had to be in a higher location. With the help of the aqueducts, if there's a deeper valley in between two hills, they transported the water to the city. And from the fountain, from the main fountain, they just let all the city get their water from the main fountain. The nice thing about it is that once they built these kind of fountains, they didn't just make it for the use of the city, but to make it so nicely decorated as a nice decoration for the city at the same time. So the same thing was applied here. So you just need to imagine, unfortunately, in the back wall being so high, some pillars erected with some niches, and between those pillars and the niches, some statues which they found in the excavation house right now of some goddesses, one after another. And this area formed a very large pool. And from this pool, if the water was exceeding the level, by the way, now you can see all these stones, but you need to imagine marble blocks on each side of it. So you put 2 marble blocks, and the area in between would be filled with material like this. And the water exceeding the level, which was deep enough actually, would come down here, and then you can see that water channel down there. Yep. So from here, it would run into the city, and then it would go underground, because right in the middle of the street underground, we've got the real drainage of the city. so that the water that exceeds the pool will come down here, and from here it goes to the drainage. That's the plan of the fountain. And they had one problem here. You remember I was telling you about the spring water that they had? In many of the pipes they have found calcium deposits. It's like the veins, you know, when you got problems with your veins, they got stuck in. It's very similar to that. So some of the pines would have the calcium deposits. Let's try all together. The other corner is to that section. There's a marble door you can see over there. This was the agora, the marketplace of the city. We generally call it the marketplace, but it's just a gathering area, public area, like a mall, you know. And behind it, they've got a big bath building.
That mountain.
Please follow me straight this way. So that goes east, that goes west.
This is the Syrian Ephesus Road. Syria behind me, Ephesus to the front. Our group is coming from the main Cardo area to the temple, or the theater area.
Setting and then make a stadium out of it.
I can't remember where it was.
It's quite probable that on a spring festival dedicated to Dionysus, you could see all the city staying here, not to watch something for half an hour, but spend a day here. So that's why it's not just for seating capacity would be enough. And archaeologists do believe that this is 8,000 seating capacity. In 3rd century BC, Greeks, they could build their architecture, their skills would allow them to build their theaters only in the slopes of hills like this. So it's not a free standing building, but you got the slope of a hill and you put your seating areas on the slope of the hill. Whereas Romans were, actually that's a few centuries later, better architects, better engineers. So what they could do was building freestanding huge theaters. Think of Colosseum, no hills, it's not leaning onto any hill, but it's built on arches, many floors. So this is a Hellenistic one. As you can see, they got a perfect shape, natural hill, where you can put your sitting areas, big enough for 8,000 people, and it faces west. It got the, we've got in the Aegean part of the country, in the west part of the country in Turkey, it's the same thing in all the west coast. You got the breeze from the west. That's what it says on the sign. I'm just learning it now because, you know, this is just excavated. So they say that had to be the old temple, and a basilical structure was built here, long rectangular in 3 pieces. But the thing, it seems like after this 494 earthquake, it was so badly damaged, and then they rebuilt it, and it was in use until 7th century. But after that, they have taken out all those blocks of stones out of here. They were recycled. You can see actually just by the edge over there.
12,000 seating capacity here, and that is the east gate up there. You can see the remnants of the city.
Still seeing the stage building, and a bit below the stage building where you'd see the actors or the people giving the speeches. And between the pillars of this stage building, there would be some nice decoration with the statues. Like this. Names of some guilds. For the city, for the economy of the city, the guilds were very important.
They did not.
Are they what?
Sealed together.
Living quarters. Well, not necessarily.
In the direction to the theater, the big theater, our group coming up this street, the temple area, or at least the street area with the columns. Now we're coming up with this street here. This is our group coming up from the street that went to the main theater.
was founded by the king of Pergamon. His name was Attalus, and he had his brother called Eumenes. And in so many kingdoms in the history, in different civilizations, we always had this problem. You always read about the problem of succession. Who is going to be the next king? And brothers killing each other? Maybe it's not their choice, but that's their fate. That's their destiny at the end. But this did not happen to Attalus and Eumenes. They were brothers who ruled together, and therefore this city was named as Philadelphia. I can see some of you doing this. Most probably you know the meaning of the word Philadelphia. That means brotherly love. And the reason is Attalus and Eumenes, as brothers, they ruled their kingdom and they got on well with each other. So that's why it was called as Philadelphia. It was, the city was not as rich as the others mentioned in this region and mentioned in the 7 churches of Asia Minor, and it was destroyed by earthquakes one after another. And being a poor and not as important as Hierapolis or Colossae, they are the ones that suffered the most after all these earthquakes. And in time it lost its importance, and unfortunately, as we got this little town just built quite much, we don't have anything remaining from the biblical times. Nothing from 1st or 2nd century AD, apart from only a few stones found here and there. So the only interesting thing that we can see is it is believed to be a church built in around 500 AD, so let's say 6th century, with some additional decoration made in 11th century. It seems like after one of those earthquakes it totally collapsed and it was not rebuilt after that time. We've got some of the main large pillars on it, with a few of the frescoes, if you look at it very carefully, still being on the walls. Yes, this is the little town's square. As I told you, from a little village, it's been just growing. There were some Christians from the city of Philadelphia who were martyred in the early Christian era. In this city, and even in Smyrna, there were some who were faithful Christians, originally from the city of Philadelphia. And I was telling you that some cities, they are criticized in the Revelation, and this city of Philadelphia and the city of Smyrna might be accepted as a very good Christian congregation as an example. Kapatalım mı onun aynasını ya? Ha? Geri al, kapatayım istersen. Ha? Aynayı kapatsak geçer misin?
We're coming up to the Philadelphia ruins, the old church that was here.
For the first time in the town of Assos. So we got different things. Some of these stones that you can see in the inscriptions are from medieval era. Some are only 200 years old. So they really are from different periods of time. But for sure, this is from much earlier period, so might be even 2nd century.
You can see the frescoes if you zoom in.
Of course, of course. When you look up here, you can see on both remains there is like a kind of a beginning.
These things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
You remember I was telling you about the richest man, Croesus, who had the golden touch, and that was the golden era of Sardis. I just heard this conversation between Croesus and Cyrus. So Cyrus, the emperor of the Persians, he captured the city, and he brought an end to the Lydian kingdom. But the city, although it was destroyed at first by the Persians, it did not lose its importance. It's because maybe after he realized that it was his own city, as you know, you just heard, that he was destroying. So he stopped that and he made the city the satrapy, simply, which means the capital city of his Asia Minor province, let's say, of the great empire. So he had a mayor that ruled all around this region, and this was the center. So it remained as a very large and very rich city for a couple of centuries more. But after Alexander the Great passed through here, after 4th century BC, there were some new cities founded. So I can say that, for instance, Pergamon became such an important city. A couple of centuries later, Ephesus became really very important. And after 4th century, we can say that it was the most important, but still highly populated, where you got Jews and other people as well. So it was a multicultural, large, highly populated city. But as I said, not the biggest, not the capital city. But there are actually a couple of other interesting myths about this place. According to that myth, the most famous one, which is not the most moral, nice moral example I can say. The king of this city, he was so proud of the beauty of his wife. The queen was so beautiful, and he was weak in one way. He was always talking about how beautiful his wife was. And all the people, what can you say? The king is telling you that his wife is so beautiful. She is the most beautiful woman. Yes, sir. but sure. But at the end, he somehow wanted to share this, that, you know, she was so gorgeous, she was so beautiful. So one of the guys that worked in the palace, he had him in his court, and he said, my wife is the most beautiful woman on earth. You will hide when she will be dressing, you know, changing her clothes. So she will be naked at a point, and you'll be able to see how beautiful she is. That woman, the queen, realized that that man was just, you know, hiding and watching. So she didn't say anything at the moment, but then she called him and she said, I know what you have done. And he told the story. She was so upset and mad at this guy and at her husband as well. So she said, I give you two choices. You either kill my husband for doing this, or I will let everyone know that I realize that it was you over there, and my husband cannot take this, so he will have to have you killed. As you may guess, the guy killed the king. And then there was great chaos. So they had to kill, because he killed the king. But they went to the oracle, and the oracle said that the woman, I forgot to tell you the story, one detail of it. The woman just said, then I'll marry you. So he wanted to get married, but for that they went to go to the oracle, and the oracle said that he would be a good king. But his kingdom would come to an end after 5th generation. That 5th generation is Croesus, who was the richest man who lost against Cyrus. So his city was just destroyed. So he became the king that way, and his son Croesus first was minting the first coins that we used in the history of humankind as money. He guaranteed the value of those coins, and unfortunately he lost. There are so many stories about how he lost the battle, because his city was so well protected with the walls around. He depended on his mercenaries, whereas Persians had their own armies. They fought in the battlefield and there was no clear victory. They all left. He thought that the Persians were leaving. So he came back to his city, letting the mercenaries go. So he just came back to his city, and Persians attacked and besieged the city when the mercenaries were gone. And the city was so well fortified, but there was one weak point that you could not see when besieging the city from outside. According to the story, one of the soldiers of the city dropped his helmet. And it was so easy to climb. So he just got outside of the fortification, got the helmet and climbed up. And one man has realized that, has noticed that, and they attacked the city from that side and they captured the city. Croesus was such a proud man. He knew that he was one of the wealthiest men on earth, and he thought that the happiness would come with wealth. The most well-known politician of the city of Athens, who you can accept him as one of the most important philosophers of the time as well, was called Solon. He was kind of a scientist for his time, because he's the guy who tried to put down works of Homer together. So we owe Iliad a bit to him, because there were so many different stories told in different places. He gathered them and tried to make one Iliad for everyone. Same version, one version. And he gave him a signature. See, look at my wealth. I'm the wealthiest man on earth. And he asked him the question, who do you think is the happiest man on earth? Solon gave him the name of an ordinary Athenian who just had enough for himself. And he was happy with it. He was the happiest man on earth. He wasn't rich at all, but he was the happiest man on earth. And Solon ended his comment about the happiest man on earth, until I saw you dying happy with all this wealth, I would not call you the happiest man on earth. And you just heard, that's the true historical story. He was captured by the Persians. People were just getting the spoils out of the city, destroying the buildings, and they arranged a stake to burn him to death. And there he started to laugh when people were stealing all his wealth that made him thought that he was the happiest person. And Cyrus stopped the soldiers killing this man. He asked him the question. Then he said, because he was remembering what Solon told him, he was not the happiest man on earth, everything. He said, I'm plundering your city, and you're laughing. He said, that's not my city now. You're plundering your own city. I'm the guy on the stake here. You're going to burn me down. So it's your city. So there are many interesting myths and many interesting historical stories. We got the plan of the city here. They have found so many different things, but not much remains in the Acropolis. So you'll just be seeing, a little bit of a fragment of a city wall here and there at the top. So the main things are down in this area. And after we see this, I'm planning to take you to the Temple of Artemis as well, which is not too far. Maybe we'll get back on the bus, but it's going to be a 2 minutes maybe ride, or 5 minutes ride from here to the Temple of Artemis. Now I'll ask you, please watch your steps and follow me that way. And
below where we're walking, about 3 feet, is the Roman road. These are the shops. There's some restaurants, some hardware along these western road.
A later period, this is very late Roman era. This should be like 4th century AD, but historians believe that the Roman street, the Roman road, had to be here as well. You can hear all these cars. You remember we came by bus right here, right about that area. You see, you just dig 6 feet under, you find the 4th century AD Roman road. If you dig 6 feet under again, you're going to find another road that goes, that dates back to 6th century BC. And the interesting thing is, I might have told you about this, these people were great engineers. When it comes to going from A to B in the ancient times, they knew the best places to build their roads. And Romans did the same thing. They made the roads perfect. That's one of the reasons for the success of the Roman Empire, both for the trade and for the military reasons. And that worked quite well for Paul, so that he could cover all those long distances in 1st century AD. Both by the sea, we must add, and on these roads as well. most possibly in some places on a cart, but in most of it just walking from one city to the other. And we'll keep seeing some more shops. At the very end, there might be a few difficult steps to take, but I'd like to show you at the very end to the left, you'll be able to see an area which is dug a bit deeper. You'll be able to see some Hellenistic steps, which is dated back to 3rd century BC approximately. So this level is more like 3rd, 4th century AD level, like the road that you can see. But a little deeper you dig, you can find things from earlier periods. Now I'll ask you to follow me this way. Keep an eye on the shops to our left. You can see that they've got their pipe system, so water going in and out of the constructed. It belongs to a building that was built in 3rd century AD. Therefore, we got like 600 years difference nearly. 3rd century BC and 3rd century AD. But most of this wall, as I said, actually you don't have to be an archaeologist. It looks brand new. It's been rebuilt just a few years ago.
I'll be reading. Alright, and the angel of the church in Sardis write, the words of him who has 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up and strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have not found your works complete in the sight of my God. Remember then what you receive and heard. Keep it and repent. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know what hour I will come against you. Yet you still have a few names in Sardis, people who have not sold their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. The one who conquers will be thus clothed thus in white garments, and will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess in his name and before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear at what the Spirit says to the churches.
Jewish population was quite strong in the city of Sardis. It's always been known for its wealth. The population, I mean, it was being the capital city or not for some time, but at the end it's always been a rich and an important city. And it seems like the Jewish people, even after 1st century AD, enjoyed certain privileges here. It is because this is a really very large hall, and this is the entrance, the courtyard for the synagogue. But actually, this was not built as a synagogue. It seems like the Jewish population was quite privileged here, so they are given the chance to use this large building as their synagogue. Therefore, the plan is a bit wrong for the synagogue. But anyway, they had a huge temple this way. By the way, as we walk in, you can see some beautiful, beautiful 3rd century AD Roman mosaics on the floor. You must have seen similar type of mosaics, especially when you were in Athens. These are your steps that we are going to have. You can see some geometrical design, especially mosaics on the floor. And we've got some inscriptions. Some of them are about the time that it was built. It was built right after the time of Septimius Severus, so 3rd century AD. And as we walk into the main temple section here, on the walls you'll be able to see some inscriptions again. To the emperor, or for the emperor, and Caesari to the Caesar. They use both titles. So both imperator, emperor, and Caesar. And they would use another term, another title in Greek, which is Sebastos, which means the revered one, actually in Greek. But the emperors use that title, and the exact translation is again emperor. So it's like the emperor, the ruler. Autokrator means the self-ruling one, but he is the one that rules all over the others. Like Otto, say Auto, that's the same thing. So Autokratore, Caesare, Sebasto, it says. So it's the continuation. You got a bit of everything when you look at it, and you got a bit of late 3rd century, so other cultures influences as well. So those big ones, they look like Ionian. Those are they're composite, which means a mixture of Corinthian and Ionic. Those over there. But about those two, at the top, the shorter marble ones, they are the Corinthian ones. And the others look more like Roman, I can say. So they all look different. It is quite normal for that period of time to have different orders in art to be used on the same building. I was just talking about it. For those who could not hear me, I'd like to repeat that many of their statues and many of their inscriptions, which would be reliefs simply on the stones, they would be painted as well. So, of course, these are not original, but after they found it, they just made it look like the original. So they put that red paint into it. And I'll ask you to follow me from the marble court. As I was explaining, all these walls used to be covered with marble. That's why they call it the marble court. You're going to see the first pool. And behind this area, they had the Roman bath. Swimming. Did you go into the bath in Ephesus?
No.
No. Any baths in Greece?
Not yet.
Maybe I may say a few things. I don't want to bore everyone telling the same story over and over.
Okay, everybody, if you want to listen to why he's talking about the baths.
Well, I don't know how much you know about the ancient baths, but these Romans, they were great engineers. First of all, they could start a great fire, and they built a few different rooms just adjacent to each other. Their genius is because they built their rooms. Unfortunately, here we don't have a good example, as it hasn't been excavated, this part. But they could have the heated air, simply the steam, the hot air, to be circulated under the building. So you got the fire and the room just next to it. As you got the hot air circulated just next to it, it would be a very hot room. And in most of the rich cities, Roman baths, they would have a pool, little pool, filled with hot water. They would not, Romans were smart people, they would not spend their all time in a Roman bath in the hot section. Because they circulate just adjacent to the hot room, they circulate the hot air into the other room, but as the fire is on the other side of the building, it doesn't become as hot as the hot room, it's just a warm room. So they would have another pool over there as well, which is quite essential, that's quite important. And then you would have the cold section. Cold section is more like a changing room at the same time, and that's the place where they spend more of their time. Those rich Romans. Slaves are just in so many different ways trying to get the fire ready for these people, and Romans spend there a long time. Today you got all the loofah and everything. We know that they had sponge, of course, but sponge today is something that you can easily get. For those people, it wasn't something that easy to get sponge. I mean, a natural sponge, it's such a difficult thing to get. So what do you think they had? If you don't have any shower gels, any shampoo, or if no soaps, what do they use? They used mainly olive oil. Imagine those guys coming here for some lectures about Iliad, about Odyssey, about gods and goddesses. We're talking about an ancient gymnasium in the Greek or Roman era. And then you got some physical exercises. One of the most common sports for them would be wrestling. So you go out over there doing wrestling. You remember I was explaining that the Greek word gymnos means naked, so most possibly some naked. And ladies, I'm sorry, but it seems like in the ancient times, ladies were not given much importance when it comes to education. So it's more about, you know, simple education for the ladies, and up to a certain age. But mostly men would be here performing their sports, and in this palaestra, being naked, maybe with a bit of olive oil, getting all this mud around their body, they would come down here. And to soften all that soil drying on their skin, they would use olive oil. And you go into the hot section and you sweat out. That helps to get your skin softer. And then they could have used a very fine quality sand in certain countries to be mixed with olive oil to scrub the dirt of your body. And there is another tool that they used. In some archaeological museums, you could have seen it. It's called striglis. It's like a hook-shaped tool. If you need to scratch the dirt off your body, that's something that you can use. So that's one other thing that they used. They were smart enough to understand that if you stay in a hot room for a very long time, and then if you just run to the cold section, that's not going to be good for your health. Just like staying in a hot section is going to put your blood pressure down, that makes nearly the same effect. That's why you got the hot section, you stay there for a certain time, you got the scrubbing and everything, and then you go to the warm section and stay over there so that your body gets adjusted to the temperature, and then you go out to the cold section. So in any Roman bath, they've got the same system. I always tell people there had to be only one Roman engineer and only one architect for all those centuries, because they always built the same thing. And generally in these kind of gymnasium complexes, they attached the school building where the lectures were, the place where they were exercising, and a Roman bath. Generally old gymnasium complex. What I thought you were asking. So that's the real kind of coloring. That's not and in the late Roman era, they have recycled so many captains of pillars. In the ancient times, they would not necessarily.
This is the Pactolus River, supposedly where Midas washed his hands, and it is right in the area where the Temple of Artemis.
If you think it's not going to be very difficult for you, I'd say let's go up there. It's going to be easier for you to see the reproductions and the plans to be able to understand the Temple of Artemis over there, and an altar area, as you can see right in front of it. The first thing I would like to tell you is, I don't know what you expect to see when we talk about the ancient temples. I mean, I can talk about my expectation. Before I studied a history of art and all Greek culture, ancient Greek culture, I thought that like today's temples, like, you know, when I say a church, you just walk in, you know, there is the altar, and you can go all the way, you know, to the front side. It seems like things were a bit different in the ancient cultures. So that holy area of the temple was not open for the ordinary people. So for this, they had to have an altar. When we say altar, mostly we think of, you know, inside a church, a table or something like that. Whereas, when we say an altar, there could be some altar by themselves. Like tomorrow, I'm going to take you to the Pergamon, the city of Pergamon. I think Tony must have given you some pictures. I think you should have a look at that. That is such a pain for all the Turkish tour guides. When, you know, we were talking, Tony, I talked about it. There was a huge altar, most possibly the biggest altar ever built in 3rd, 2nd century BC. And it is bigger than many temples built. So that's an altar, bigger than a temple. But normally for these kind of large temples, it was the same thing in the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. There has to be a very big altar in front of the building. That is a place where people do their libation, sacrificing anything, and worshipping the god or the goddess. So mostly the ordinary people would not go in. Everything happens for the ordinary people in this altar area that you can see. And when they dug this area, it was an American team that I was talking about. Those who were a bit, you know, slow coming behind us, they can see this was it 1912, 1913 crane that the American archaeologists worked to erect some of these pillars and work on this ancient site. We believe that there had to be, as early as 6th century BC, from the Lydian era, a statue and a cult of Artemis here. So those ordinary people, when they came to this temple, without going in, they could see a huge statue of Artemis, the main goddess of this region, and they could worship her here by the altar. But then what, you need to know a bit about Artemis, but being, just having gone to Ephesus, your guides must have told you about the continuation of the culture here. Because if you go back thousands of years, you could see that there were some indigenous people here whose religion was, whose world of gods and goddesses was more matriarchal. So rather than Zeus, they worshipped the mother goddess of earth. And going through many civilizations, and especially after the arrival of the Greek people, therefore the existing culture melting in the same pot with the arriving Greek culture, the Artemis was not only like the Greek Artemis here, but it was an Anatolian goddess of this region. The way that she is depicted, have you seen the Ephesus museum? Oh no, it's closed, isn't it? The museum is closed right now. But you must have seen a depiction of Artemis of Ephesus. Totally different outfit with a funny kind of hat, and if you see in Italy an Artemis or in Greece an Artemis, she'd be the hunting goddess. Her outfit would be totally different. The reason is, this region is the place where they worshipped Sibyl, mother goddess of earth, Kubaba, Kibele, with different names in different centuries. And Artemis, after the Greek culture was quite spread, had the characteristics of the other goddesses in her. So they still called it Artemis, but she was not only the Greek goddess Artemis. Therefore, Lydians, which was a different civilization than the Greeks, worshipped Artemis here. And then came the Persian era. This cult went on, and especially after Alexander the Great came here and brought an end to the Persian rule, a temple, a huge temple, a construction for a huge temple for the Artemis, for the goddess, started here. But they could not finish it, because they planned a huge building. And there you can see the plan had to be like this, the altar being here. It is quite interesting to see that they had separated the area in two. So this made us think that as the holy section that they called as naos was separated in two, there could have been two gods or goddesses being worshipped at the time. So the ones that would come to our mind would be mainly Zeus and Artemis. Being here, we still call it the Temple of Artemis. And in the Roman era, well, 1780 earthquake destroyed most of this temple. So although they started to construct this in around 300 BC, the plan of the building was changed after it got destroyed by the earthquake. So this is what they planned to build. You can see that they've got 2 rows of pillars in the front side, and to the sides, a bit wide from the main wall of the temple, 1 row of pillars. But when you build it this way, a bit far from the building, when you look at the building from a distance, it looks as if there are 2 rows of pillars. That's an illusion for the eyes. If there are 2 pillars on the sides of a temple, they would call it the plan as dipteros. If it looks like this, if it is like this, only 1 row of pillar, but it looks like 2, they call it pseudo-dipteros. Pseudo, you might be familiar with that term. If I say pseudomai, I mean I'd say in Greek I'm lying, I'm faking. So it's a fake thing that just makes it look bigger, as if there are more pillars in it. And but at the end, they could not finish it with all those pillars, so there are some missing ones, and this is what it looks like today. They divided the temple in the Roman era in a different way in 2, and one part of it remained as a temple of Artemis, and where the empress was worshipped. The other part of it was dedicated to Zeus, where the emperor was worshipped. This is an important time because in the year 150,
in Ephesus, maybe your tour guides told you about it, in the year 150, this city was given the title Neocorus. The exact translation for it is the one who sweeps the temple. And how can this be a good title for a city? It's because imperial cult was very important, and if you'd like to understand why early Christians were persecuted, you need to know this, that those Christians did not want to compromise and even burn an incense in those temples dedicated to the Roman emperors. Whereas for the Roman emperors, it was important to have those temples, especially in the big, highly populated cities. That would be a privilege for those cities. The city of Ephesus, it is such an important city that they were given the title 4 times. They built temples dedicated to different emperors at 4 different times. So they were those temple wardens, sweeper of the temple dedicated to emperors. And you would show your loyalty by being able to build those temples for the emperors and by worshiping him over there. Some scholars do accept it as a true religion. Some do say that it was not a true religion, but just a sign of loyalty to the emperor. But at the end, they have done it, and those early Christians refused it. This is again one of those places where they worship Zeus, Artemis mainly, but then the emperor and the empress. And the reason why the city wanted to build again in the Roman era, in 2nd century AD, a huge Roman temple here, is that they were given by the Roman emperor the title Neocorus. So it expanded with more pillars, as you can see here. It became a larger thing. So majority of those pillars are dated from 2nd century AD, from the Roman era. I'll take you, so we'll start to walk around all those pillars, and when we go all the way to the other corner that you cannot see behind those 2 pillars, you're going to see something almost attached. It's a bit of a strange structure, I gotta say. It is from 4th century AD. It is because, yes, they were still building those temples for the Roman emperors and worshiping those gods and goddesses in the royal family, but that started to come to an end, it seems like here, in around 4th century AD. You remember we have seen the 3rd century AD synagogue, and in 4th century AD, it's hard to believe, but just adjacent to the old temple of Artemis, Christians built their little chapel. So when we walk all the way around the structure, you'll be able to see a 4th century AD, maybe 5th century AD Christian chapel.
This is the 4th century church built on the back of the Temple of Artemis. Temple of Artemis from above. Most of our groups up here.
At the time used as a church. Not much remains, but let's walk around and see, because you can walk into the basilical complex from the other side, so please follow me this way.
We're at Thyatira.
Well, it is one of the 7 churches, obviously, and this was a city famous for the number of its guilds. There was so much of trade, and there were so many different types of guilds here. To be able to, and so many cities, including this one, in those letters, are warned against compromising. Because in the society that they live in, there are certain traditions. So you try to be a good Christian, but you live in a certain society,
and they do have certain traditions. And those traditions might be against Christianity because they have certain feasts which would end up sacrificing animals to gods, and Paul made it clear that you should not be eating those meats of sacrificed animals to those gods and goddesses. And some of those feasts would end up with sexual immorality. And the importance of what I just first had said is there were so many guilds of textile. This city is so famous for a special purple color wool. And the process of dyeing it is incredible. They made it so extraordinarily expensive. A couple of centuries later, that became the imperial color. The only person who would be able to wear purple was the emperor and the royal family. They used, the Byzantine emperors were used a kind of a title, which is Porphyrogenitus. That means born in purple. Even the Catholics, they used it. You know, when you're promoted to cardinal, that's what they say. Promoted to purple. So that purple is quite interesting. It's because they made it by mainly using snails. And you may need to use a ton of, some tons of snails even for one little piece of clothing. That was very, very expensive. And they were from here. They had a great bronze, especially for the armor, shields. The bronze guild. Why am I talking about? And there were other guilds as well. The importance of these guilds is, if you'd like to have your business to go on well, you have to show up on those important religious days of the pagan culture. If you just say that, hey, I'm Christian, I cannot take place in the daily life, in your traditions, because I don't want to compromise, you may lose your business and etc. So knowing that the guilds were very important here, they may lose their deals and their business. So that's why they had to be there, but at the same time not compromise. So that's the historical connection, I can say, that you need to know. Purple color, and talking about the purple color, does it ring any bells to you from another part of the Bible? There was someone else who was selling, actually not here. Was she in Philippi?
Yes, Lydia.
Lydia selling purple. She, if I'm not wrong, I might be, she was a Gentile who worshiped God. So she was different than all the other pagans who met Paul. And they were in Philippi, and she was from the city of Thyatira. When you read the letter written to this church of Thyatira, you would see a woman named Jezebel is mentioned. Mostly Christian scholars believe that maybe there was a woman here whose name was not Jezebel necessarily, but she was just like the Jezebel mentioned in the Old Testament, not to be followed. So simply the warnings to this city is about compromising simply sexual immorality and those eating the meat of those animals sacrificed to God. And it is about this woman Jezebel as well at the same time. And some do find a kind of a, some would like to see a kind of a connection, not all Christian scholars when reading the letter written to Thyatira, but at the beginning of that letter you can see the words, it might be translated as brass or bronze, for the eyes and for the feet of Christ. Some do see it as the city was quite famous for the bronze guild, bronze products made, so that might be another historical connection. Some do understand it another way. So that one is, up to you how you see it, how you'd get it. But it is correct that the city was famous for its bronze products and for its bronze guild as well.
And to the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these things says the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire, and his feet like fine brass. I know your works, love, service, faith, and your patience. And as for your works, the last are more than the first. Nevertheless, I have a few things against you, because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and to eat things sacrificed to idols. And I gave her time to repent of her sexual immorality, and she did not repent. Indeed, I will cast her into a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, unless they repent of their deeds. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he who searches the minds and hearts, and I will give to each one of you according to your works. Now to you I say, and to the rest in Thyatira, as many as do not have this doctrine, who have not known the depths of Satan, as they say, I will put on you no other burden, but hold fast what you have till I come. And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like a potter's vessel, as I also have received from my Father. And I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
Continue here at Thyatira, you can see the old ancient Roman road in this area. Go ahead.
I'll let you take pictures. I don't know that I can read them. I just pretended that looked really good.
Pictures will be.
This is a view from Pergamum, looking over the modern city of Bergamo, and then looking up to the Acropolis is our group.
So that in the ancient times, if you had a victory over your enemies, it could have been something common to build a temple dedicated to Athena, who brought the victory for your country. And actually, just showing you this, that German engineer stole not only the altar of Zeus, but the temple of Athena as well. So this is in Germany too. This is what the temple of Athena looked like. And here it says, the king Eumenes. Well, it's obviously he had it built. That's the name, as King Eumenes. It says Athena, the victory bringer. Nikephoroi. You know, some of you studied Greek, that, you know, I don't know if it sounds familiar, but Nikephoroi, the one who brings victory. So they have done that. It is because in 3rd century, they had the terrible threat of those people who came from Central Europe. I don't know if there is any one of you who do have Celtic ancestry, but Celtic tribes, they were here.
Wow.
And they settled down in Galatia, which is a biblical region, Galatia, that was ruled by a tribe of Celtic people. And they were quite, according to the people of Pergamon, they were barbaric and very fearful tribes. They were difficult to fight against. And they were quite scared. So the most important victory of the kingdom of Pergamon, there are two. One is against Antioch of Seleucids, with the alliance of Roman Empire. The other one by themselves against Celtic tribes. After having those two victories, two important buildings were built. One was built right in the middle over there. The Temple of Athena, unfortunately, all of it is taken to Berlin. And it was surrounded with this colonnaded area. Can you see the pillars?
Yes.
You just need to imagine this place, the colonnaded area, to be 2-storied. From the 2nd floor of the colonnaded area, that was the entrance to that building, which was the main library building. You remember the 2nd largest library of the ancient world? I believe that that was the main library building, but not the only library building. Because it's not large enough to be able to hold 200,000 scrolls. So in other parts of the city, there had to be some other library buildings at a time, but that is supposed to be the main library building. So now, please follow me all the way marble. They were quite lucky about can you see not the white marble but the other stone, which is local. If you dig here, this is what you get from this mountain. So that is a local stone that you can get even from the top of this Acropolis. But we don't have white marble on the top of this hill. So you see how steep it is just looking that way? All these blocks of white marble had to be shipped to the harbor of Pergamon, which is just a few miles, 10 minutes drive today. And they had to be brought on the flat land. It's not a big problem. You can roll them on the trunks of trees. But bringing all those pillars all the way up to the Acropolis, that had to be a huge problem. So the white marble is not local white marble of this hill. That is something amazing. I got someone actually when we were on the cable car to ask me that question, which is a very good question. The biggest problem of this city, it seems like they had so many slaves and animals that they could use to take all the stone up to the top of this hill, but the biggest problem is water. They built aqueducts with it. And they have used the pressure of the water. If you got two little pipes, one wider, one narrower, if you put pressure on the narrower side, you can make the the level of the water in the wider pipe higher. So that's what they have used. Hard to believe, but in the Roman era, they've simply done that. And they stored rainwater as much as they could at the Acropolis. That's how they solved their problem. But meanwhile, at the meantime, I have to remind you that the ordinary people lived down the valley. This is the place only for the most important buildings of the city, like the temples. So after you take your photos of the Trajan Temple, I'll ask you to follow me. It is because from one angle I can show you the remains of most of the buildings down here. Oh, nice reach.
It was good.
That pressure principle is still being used today. Shrink it to smaller to make the pressure a lot greater where they can push it up hills.
Of course, of course. Please come closer. It's going to be a very, very late lunch again because of the last minute change in our plans as well in the morning.
When we go down the theater, we have to come back up.
No.
Oh. I can go down. But
You see the tree over there, the big tree down there? We'll walk the first part of the stairs down, and from there we take the turn to the left, and we are going to end up by the only remains of the Altar of Zeus. If you come a bit closer, I do have the plan of the city. And by looking at this, you can understand what I meant by saying as if you're playing card games. You could see all the buildings because they terraced the area so well, so none of the buildings would be blocking the view of the other in this area on top of the hill. You got many different buildings down here. Some of them are thought to be the palace complex of the ruling family. And as all these seats, they had to be white marble at the time. They made it in white color. But this area that I'm pointing out on this map, I don't know if you all can see it, but it had to be the theater. That for the steep it has to be number one in the world, ranked number one for the steep it has. It had to have like 10,000 seating capacity. It's right down there. Starting right in front of it, there was a colonnaded area. You see this long colonnaded area? And can you see in right down at the bottom of the steps an area that goes straight with the remains of some buildings? It had to be that colonnaded area. If you come a bit close to me and look down that way, you're going to see the remains of some white marble little temple mentioned here on the map. That is a temple of Dionysus. Do you remember I mentioned that Dionysus was not only the god of wine and grapes, but he was at the same time the god of the spring festival and theater? That's why they preferred having the temple for Dionysus right by the theater. And looking down all the way, you can see here on the map that I'm pointing at the altar of Zeus. Again, see that big tree down there? The first 5 steps being original? That's the altar of Zeus. But can you see on a higher platform, we've got the Temple of Athena. You remember I just stopped and explained? It's that area where we got the Temple of Athena. Here, we have got the Temple of Athena, right in front of my finger here. That's the Temple of Athena. Can you see 2-storied colonnaded area? From the 2nd floor, you enter to the library. 2 floors. On the plan Tony gave you, you can see all this. And at the very top, we got the temple dedicated to Trajan. But the problem is, this is not a flat area, this is a very steep hill. Can you see, just looking down right in front of us, the arches? Yes. They planned this area to be so large. To be able to have this large area, they had to terrace this area. What I mean by saying terracing it is they built so many arches to fill in the area so that the great weight of the temple and the great weight of its courtyard would be supported, because normally it is like this, the terrain. But you're trying to build something like this, and at the bottom there is nothing. So at the bottom they built these arches to be able to support, and that's going to be an interesting visit for you, because I'm planning to take you down the steps. We'll be able to walk through those arches. And the idea was to be able to have this area flat, large enough, strong enough to support. Last time you came, did you go to Asclepion? This time you're not going.
We're not.
You're not. That's not again on the itinerary. Before you tell me about it, I'm telling you.
What can we trade? Let's make a deal.
Why do you know
that's like, for that I had to depart at 6 o'clock in the morning. So after you take your photos, please follow me. Look at the couple going down. That's the way we're going.
Hey, Barchin, at least let me point to me on the video here so I can...
The area down there is Asclepion. That is a place where they had a kind of a healing center, dedicated to Asclepius.
Where the trees are?
Exactly, that area.
Okay. Let's zoom in on
It's
it now.
the harbor back there.
Yes. It's a bit hazy, so it cannot be seen, but that's where the water is.
It wouldn't make fun easy.
We are now going to the theater area, having gone through the arched areas, which is a substructure of the Tragium.
A colonnaded area around the Temple of Athena. You see the pillars over there, which was a two-storied colonnaded area. From the second floor of it, can you see the building right behind it on a higher level? That was a library complex. Therefore, from the second level of the colonnaded area, you could go into the library back then. They've got some aqueducts built from behind that hill so that the water source was that way. There are still some remains of the aqueducts. Most of the people think that had to be an aqueduct, but it was not. There was an amphitheater. One mistake we, just common people we always make, but my our professor of archaeology was mad at us students making that mistake. Whenever we go to an ancient city and we see an ancient theater, we call it an amphitheater. The word amphi is round in Greek. So you know what Colosseum looks like? Yeah. It's totally a round building. Yeah. That's like an amphitheater. The theater that you saw in Ephesus, you remember it was like, you may call it either semicircular or horseshoe shape with a stage building. Is the circular? No, it's not. So that's a Roman theater. So that's the thing. So you don't call any ancient theater, if you'd like to play by the rules, an amphitheater. Excuse me. If you'd like to go, in the right way. So this is a Hellenistic theater. I'm not going to give you a very long lecture about the theaters, but I'll again mention one difference between the early Greek theaters with the later period Roman theaters. Roman theaters, I told you this before, had permanent stage buildings. You remember? Mm-hmm.
Revelation 2, beginning verse 12. To the angel of the church in Pergamos write, These things says he who has the sharp two-edged sword. I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you, because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. Thus you also have those who hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which things I hate.
Repent, or else I will come to you quickly and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written which no one knows except him who receives it.
I'm trying to see if we can hear you.
He's in his own little world.
He is.
Where's he going?
He's in a happy place.
Off the cliff.
I hope he
Don't do
stops.
it.
Have we made fun of him too much?
I think I'm going to leave him behind. Let's go. The theater of the Acropolis. As I said, ordinary people live down there. The most important people and the most important temples were built up this way in the ancient times. As I told you, mainly in the 3rd and the 2nd century BC. And when you go to the Acropolis of Athens, it's mostly about religion. When when I say religion, I mean the ancient temples and so on. But still, though, although I just said that this is not necessarily for the ordinary people where people lived, certain number of people lived up here as well, and it is not designed only for the religion, but for the daily life for them at the same time. Yes, there are the altars and so on, but any big city at the time, any rich city, would have had those kind of monumental buildings. And now we're gonna go.
We're going.
It is.
Come get my camera and take a picture.
That's the Temple of Dionysus. I just want to remind you again. We're gonna go this way, and the first building that we'll be able to see, actually not much remains. You remember I showed the pictures. They are in Germany. That's going to be the altar of Zeus. As I've got everyone here, maybe I can say a few words. Unfortunately, what I can do right now is only to show you the pictures taken in Germany right now, so you'll not be able to see much. I was just kidding around, of course, telling you, but 5 steps original, you'll be able to see those. But after reading the scripture, I can tell you what mostly Christian scholars believe. There's this biblical archaeology review and all that in all the magazines. It says in a letter written to this church, you live in a city where the Satan dwells, and this city where the throne of Satan was. So Christian scholars believe that most possibly that altar of Zeus refers to, or actually the throne of Satan refers to the altar of Zeus here. Zeus being the captain of the gods and having the biggest altar ever built for him to be here. So mostly they agree on that. There is, I'd like to tell you all the other ideas. There is one other idea actually about it, what the throne of the Satan could mean. This was the seat of the imperial cult at the same time. So worshipping the imperial cult, the emperors, this was the capital city, therefore they had it first here. I mean, just so you can see Temple of Trajan up there. On the way down to those cable cars, after we see the altar of Zeus, we are going to see another area where they worship their earlier kings, Eumenes and Attalus as well. So they had that sort of a culture even before, and in the Roman era they had it as well. Some scholars do believe that throne of the Satan could refer to that imperial cult, rather than only one single structure over there. But mostly they say it had to be that altar of Zeus.
Question.
Yes.
What activities did they engage in when they were performing a worship to some idol or emperor?
Well, it could have been only burning an incense, pouring down some water, pouring down some wine. It could be sacrificing an animal. When sacrificing animals, there were different cults. So there were different rituals, I'm sorry. So sometimes they just burned down the wool of the animal. They just burned down all animal. Sometimes they ate the meat of the sacrifice. So it really changed in time. So there are seriously so many different ways. And you could have kind of prophecy. You burn the fur of the animal or the skin of the animal. Just follow the black smoke coming out of it. The smoke goes this way and there's a bird following it. That's a good sign. It's because eagle is a symbol of Zeus. So that means Zeus is, will be on your side, whatever you're planning to do. So they could even, they could give prophecies even with these rituals.
attached to the rituals, they could do that.
First time I've seen him breathe.
No time for him. Let's go.
There's a sign right here about Garland that says Zingo. I guess it says Zeus. It's all.
Back to the Temple of Dionysius and up to the Tragium, and there's where the Temple of Athena would have been. The original steps of the altar of Zeus.
I have realized that you have noticed as we passed by some marble pieces, some of them were a bit hollow inside. They were like big statues of men and women. They are dressed like Egyptians, so Egyptian gods and goddesses. And what you need to think of, if you just look to the walls, can you see the marbles sticking out, white marbles sticking out? They were like pillars on the sides. Can you see how high it is, the top of the marbles? We're talking about nearly 33 feet high. Well, in men or women depiction at the end, like Egyptian gods and goddesses depicted on the sides of the walls, like supports to the walls in marble. And it seems like the rituals here had something to do with the water. It could have been done in different ways, but we've got diagonally the river going under this temple. That river that we just passed, I don't know if you remember, when we were approaching to the town, when we were on the bridge, I said, this is the river. It passes through the town. It passes right under this place. That's why as we were walking by around the corner, you could see some little tunnels. That's for the water. That's a very interesting system, how they got all that water to go under. And in the middle, there you can see there's an area where they've got the access to that water. That's why archaeologists do believe that somehow those rituals that they had for many Egyptian gods and goddesses had to do something with the water. If you ask me, the most extraordinary thing, the most interesting thing about a temple is they found, again, one of those statues which was hollow inside. It seems like they're working on it. I couldn't see it around. They believed that it had to be standing right in the middle by the temple, and there was an access, because the bottom part of it is hollow as well. There was an access to it from underground. So it seems like one of those priests of the ancient temple could climb up into the statue and speak from out of it. Oh, from inside of it, I'm sorry. So you come to, I mean, can you imagine, you just walk in the ancient times 2,000 years ago to this temple and you ask for a prophecy or something like that, and that huge 33 feet high statue talks to you. That has to be impressive, you know. I mean, you wouldn't buy it today, but it had to be impressive for the time. The size of it. One common misunderstanding about that about this building is mostly people think that all this red brick structure was the temple itself. I should call it a temple complex. The temple was further ahead, the end of it. So it is just like a huge courtyard that covers the main temple in the middle, and to the sides those two round buildings. So those were the places where rituals took place. That temple in the middle and two other buildings. We just passed by one of them. The other one was converted into a mosque. And where is the church, if you ask me? Can you see those new walls built? It looks totally different. No red bricks. Stones put on top of each other. So inside the red court, we call it the red court because of the red bricks. Inside that courtyard, Christians in 5th century, they built their own basilica. So the church was built inside the courtyard of the ancient temple. And that was named after St. John. Mr. St. John, we got the St. John Basilica here.
Factory that I want to show you onyx stone for you. Our factory has got two departments. First one is the onyx department, the other one is the jewelry department. Now, I want to show you onyx stone. Onyx is some precious stone with different color and different quality. First quality one is green. Green we get it 60 meters underground and it is translucent stone. Very rare stone. The other quality one is white one. White we get it 50 meters underground. It's translucent as green one. And red color one, 45 meters. And then yellow one about 25 or 20 meters and it's translucent as the other one. And then last one is the black one, called that alabaster. We get it only 5 meters, but not translucent because it is black color. So, all stones of Pergamon area, this area, first decorating, second shaping, plus polish. Now, I must be polish one for you. You can use water, aluminum oxide, and different sandpaper. After polish, I will ask one question about these information. Rex is ready for you. Now, I will ask one question about this information. This is red color. I said that how many colors, different color and different tips. This is red one. How many meters we get it red onyx? Yes, please. Yes, please. What number?
45.
Oh, 45 is a present for
I am at the harbor of Assos. We just checked into our hotel and it's about 6:45. I'm fixing to have to go eat supper. But this may be the very place where Paul came ashore.
I'll be reading from Revelation 2, starting with verse 8, going through verse 11. And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, and ye may be tried, and you may have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death.
We are at the hotel at Assos, and this is the actual harbor of Assos. The ancient ruins being at the top.
In
Acts chapter 20 and verse 13, Luke includes himself as a part of the journey and says, "And we went before the ship and sailed unto Assos, there intending to take in Paul, for so had he appointed, minding himself to go afoot. And when he had met us with us at Assos, we took him in and came to Mytilene. And we sailed thence and came the next day over against Chios, and the next day we arrived at Samos and tarried at Trogyllium, and the next day we came to Miletus." This is a place where the Apostle Paul stayed. It's a nice, peaceful place, and it's wonderful to be at a location where such a great man spent the night just like we did.
We are at Alexandrian Troas. This is where Eutychus fell out of the window.
Reading from Acts chapter 20, verses 5 through 12. These men, going ahead, waited for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days joined them at Troas, where we stayed 7 days. Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together, and in a window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the 3rd story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him." Now when he had come up and had broken bread and eaten, and talked a long while, even till daybreak, he departed. And they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted.
Here is the Trojan horse at Troy. It's so Trojan, you can't even see it.
Do you think the original had windows?
Very careful about when we are walking around in this ancient city is these kind of paths arranged for the tourists. So you see those wooden steps? Some might be broken. And the thing is, you're taking photos or filming when you're walking down the steps. There's going to be one big step, one small step, one big step, one small step. And if you're not watching your steps, you may have a problem here. It seems like they had great engineering 5,000 years ago, but unfortunately they didn't make it that well with our wooden stairs here. We've got, I'm not going to keep you waiting here for a very long time, but we got the history of the excavation. And I can say that our tour here is going to be approximately for like an hour, but I can talk about this guy for like an hour himself. This guy is just like the German engineer. You remember who got the altar of Zeus from Pergamon? He was a very rich man who spent his lifetime in excavations in different parts of the world. He was a very rich man. He was actually of German origin, but he made a lot of money in the gold rush. He had a huge bank in the west of the United States, and he sold it. He had so much money, and his dream was to be able to find all this stuff. He stole some stuff from Greece. He stole some stuff from Turkey as well. And so the treasures of Troy, unfortunately, they are not all in Turkey, but the ancient city is here. I just wanted to show you this. One of the first days he started to dig here, he found a coin, and on the coin it said, "And the wind brought wealth to the city of Troy." Imagine yourself, you're trying to find a city, you think that it should be somewhere around here, and you find that on your first days of digging. So he kept on digging here until the day he found the gold. Then he disappeared. So that's why many people would give him the credit for being able to find this place. Without him, maybe we would still not know where the city of Troy was. So for he spent his time, effort, money to dig this place. Some people respect him a lot, but on the other hand, some people call him just a treasure hunter, as he left after he found the gold. So that is Heinrich Schliemann, the most extraordinary character. The excavations were generally run by the Germans. Still, it's a cooperation of a German university and Turks. but only for a short while. We had the Americans from Cincinnati. They worked here, and William Blacken, his name is mentioned here as well. We'll start the walk, but just before we go, I'd like to show you what it says here. You remember I told you Troy was not the only city of the city. It was called, actually in Greek and in Latin, they are different. Ilion or Ilius. You remember the story that I just told you? So it's here, and there is another one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Vilusa, if you take the W out, it's almost the same thing. In the 14th century BC documents, tablets of Hittites who ruled around here, they name a city right before the Dardanelles, the safest harbor, as Vilusa. Historians do believe that as they spoke a different language, maybe they have a different name for this town, but it's still quite similar. So that's why the name of the city is Troy, Ilios, and Vilusa, according to Hittites as well. We're going to see down this way is from Troia 6. You remember there are different stratas?
And that's 6 was highest.
Well, the walls over there, Troia the 6th. That's not the highest. The highest level is Troia the 9th.
I mean the latest.
It's not. Troia the 9th is the. Troia the 6th is between 1800 BC and 1200 BC. Whereas life went on here until 500 AD. I'll show you. This is it. Homeric Troy is Troia the 6th. These are the steps that I was telling you about. Please be careful and watch your steps at all times when you're walking on these steps. Read the book?
Long time ago.
The Helen of Troy. So if I try to tell you all the story here, we're going to be here forever. But I'll just remind you only a couple of things as we are by the walls. You remember all this war, according to Homer, started because Paris somehow, the prince of the city, had Helen, who was already married to one of the kings of Greeks called Menelaus, and he was so mad, so that he went to his elder brother Agamemnon, who was quite an important man among the other Greek kings, who could organize a great campaign. So from all mainland Greece and from all the independent Greek city-states, they all came together to attack the city of Troy. This is the story told, but I am pretty sure in this land, in this city, there had to be so many wars, and I believe the reason was not the beauty of Helen, the reason had to be the location. You remember I said this is the last safe harbor? After the excavations, I'm not talking about big stuff, you know, like temples or whatever, but they have found so many little things which were brought from different parts of the ancient world. That shows us that any ship that went through here, had to stop here, and they sold their stuff. So it became such an important trade center, it became a very wealthy city. So that the Greeks maybe did not come to capture the city for the beauty of a woman, but for the money. That's very possible. So, but whatever, Homer told us a great story. And in this story, the hero of the city of Troy is Hector, the elder brother of Paris. And I have studied ancient Greek. I had to translate the original version of it to my language. And I think it's a classic, especially, you know, for this part, because if you make this a movie today, it would be a hit. It became a hit, actually. And the main thing is, well, Hector, by mistake, actually, he killed the best friend of Achilles, who was a semi-god. It's because his best friend had the armors of Achilles when fighting. And Hector thought that he was fighting against Achilles, so he could easily kill him. He was surprised because it was this young man called Patroclus. Achilles, at the time, was not fighting on the side of the king Agamemnon. It is because King Agamemnon took a slave girl of Achilles. That, you know, made him really very upset, and he said, I'll not be on your side, you're stealing my slaves. So, but after seeing his best friend being killed by Hector, he got so upset, so he got us on his carriage, or horse chariot, and he came to the walls of the city. You can remember this scene from the movie, that's why I wanted to tell you. He was just shouting, yelling the name of Hector, because he knew that it was Hector who killed his best friend, so he wanted to have a one-on-one fight. So Hector, come down. So everyone knows that Achilles is the best fighter. He's a semi-god. You can't kill him.
Actually, there's only one way of killing him. Achilles heels. So that happened at the very end of the story. So Hector has to leave. That's the part that I love when you read the book, really. Not from the movie, but when you read the book. He's a family father. He's the hero of the city with honor. He knows that he's going to be killed and he has to go down to fight against the god. So that's really a very touching moment. So he goes to talk to his wife. That's a goodbye talk. He knows that he's going to be killed, and the wife is begging him not to go, because after the city will be plundered, they will be all sold as slaves, and their children as well. But she cannot stop him because he's a man with honor, and he'll have to be killed, after fighting. So he goes out. According to Homer, he gets so scared, although he's the hero of the city, because he knows that he's going to fight against a god. So he starts to run around the city walls. So Achilles chases him. And Athena, the goddess Athena, is on the side of Greeks and Achilles at the same time. So in order to be able to help Achilles to be able to catch up with Hector, the goddess appears to Hector in the form of his brother. And Hector thinks that now my brother is on my side, so we are two, and Achilles is alone. So I can fight. So he waits and Achilles catches up with him, and then Athena disappears in a cloud. By that moment, he understands that gods and goddesses are not on his side anymore, and he has to fight and face his fate, and Achilles kills him. If you believe in these archaeologists who excavated the site, and if you'd like to believe in the very nice story of Homer, that's a myth I would like to remind you. That's a myth that the Western civilization wanted to believe in so much for centuries, for thousands of years. We might be standing by those walls where Achilles just chased Hector after. This is Troy the Sixth. This is the land walls that you can see. And it affected actually so many poets, especially 19th century. Lord Byron was around here. Christopher Marlowe was here. I don't know how much you're into literature, but some people say that maybe Shakespeare did not write it all. It was Christopher Marlowe. So it's that sort of an important man. And he wrote his poetry about the city, about the beauty of Helen. So it affected all Western civilization for centuries of time. It's not only the ancient times, it's our modern times even as well. One common question people do ask, why is it leaning this way? It has to be the thousands of years that, after earthquakes it's leaning. No. This is the original way how they built it, and it's quite simple. Yes, they were good at engineering and architecture, but they were building huge walls and they didn't want it to fall one side or the other after the first earthquake. Therefore, they made the bottom part a bit larger than the top. And it was covered though with mud. Therefore it looks like as if someone can easily climb up to these walls. It was not that way. If it were, then the Homer would not be telling us about a war that took for 10 years. So they couldn't capture the city. And that Christopher Marlowe's poetry is about it. The topless towers of Ilion. That they couldn't, that's the reason. And Homer talks about it as well. He keeps calling the same way, the topless towers of Ilion. That's the thing that protected the city, that saved the city for like 10 years. Let's start walking. Later more about the other wars, the other battles that took place in different periods of time in the history of this land. And it is so normal. It is because the powers of the East and the West, they always confronted each other by the place where East meets West. Istanbul is the same thing, and this region is the same thing. It is because we got a body of water just like in Istanbul to separate Europe from Asia. Those who are here, if you just look that way, can you see that ship over there? Yeah. That's the beginning of the Dardanelles. That's the strait. Can you see the land? There's a peninsula on the other side that's called Italy. You remember I was telling you this was the last safe harbor before you
That's the Strait of Dardanelles where that ship is at.
So, you remember seeing all those rivers that we just passed by? The harbor was filled up, so it lost its importance. So Alexandria to us became the important city as they had the functioning harbor. But the harbor was this way. You see how close it was to the Dardanelles. That's the thing that made the city really very rich. So Alexander the Great is one of those great generals who came here to fight against Persians, and he had his first great victory over the Persians in a plain very close to the city. And after he had his great victory, you remember the Temple of Athena built in Pergamon after a great victory that they had over Celtic tribes? The same thing happened here. He defeated the Persians, therefore a temple to the victory bringing goddess Athena was built here. But unfortunately not much remains. We'll be able to see a few more of the marbles down from this 300 approximately 300 BC Temple of Athena. Please follow 3000 BC, but this goes back to 2500 BC.
So are these mud bricks over here?
Yes, they're mud bricks. And they had certain parts in a bit different color. Certain parts are blackened, like there. Archaeologists believe that
These.
second city, so Troy II, had to be destroyed by a big fire. So that's why they call it the burned city. Why do we believe so? You see this, the pictures over there? You see all the pottery that they've got to the right? They were all found in the first room. So they had to keep some food and drinks over there, store it over there. So that's why they believe that it had to be more like a kind of a kitchen or a storage room, and the room behind that to be the living quarter for them. And the walls of that attached to the land walls of the city, it's still the same period of time. It dates back to 2500 BC, Troy II. And I was telling you that one of the first things that German archaeologist or treasure hunter found here was a coin on which it said, "And the wind brought wealth to Troy." You see this modern structure to keep, to protect the 4,500-year-old walls from weathering. They tried to make it look like a sailor. Remembering one of the first things they found here was the wind that brought it here. That's why they wanted, especially the modern architecture, they tried to make it look like this is a bet. So on this city walls it says, "Hey, we're guarding our city." So that's the message that they were trying to give in 3000 BC here. And by looking at this reconstruction, you can see that it was built this way, not leaning, but a bit thicker at the bottom to make it more stable. They found them here. It's a bit breezy. Well, we are by the Schliemann Trench. I was giving you a clue about this German man. Some appreciate him for spending his life in the archaeological fields. Some do call him a treasure hunter only. Well, ladies and gentlemen, his lifetime is quite interesting. He had to work in a grocery shop actually as an assistant. He was a very smart man when it comes to languages. I think he could speak 7 languages. He was in love with ancient Greek and ancient Roman culture. And somehow he was lucky when it comes to making money. So as I told you, gold rush, west of United States, he made a fortune. He was at first married to a Russian woman, and then they got divorced. And he knew, being that rich, we're talking about 1870s, this man was in Russia, then in Greece, then in Germany, then in the west coast of United States, then in Turkey, then in Greece. So he was everywhere, and he knew the metropolis of Athens. He knew that he was going to spend some time searching the ancient city of Troy, and he needed someone on his side who knew about the works of Homer and who could read ancient Greek. So he wrote a letter to the Metropolitan of Athens, and he said that he wanted to get married with a girl who would know all this stuff. I am serious. So just like a job interview, a few girls, teenagers, applied for... so he could see the photos of a few girls, and finally he talked to Sophia. Sophia knew Iliad by heart. So he asked a few questions, and he answered, certain parts of Iliad, just by heart. And the question had to be, are we all right traveling around the world? Because today you don't take the first business class flight and then, from Istanbul there's a direct flight to Los Angeles. It wasn't that way back then. So she said, as a young girl, of course. And they got married. She was I think, a teenager, and he was in his early 40s at the time. They came here to dig this place. That's a very long story because they had many problems. The first time they started to dig, the villagers who owned the land just came and, hey, what are you doing? We got our crops here. This is a very rich man, so he paid them some money. Those poor Turks thought that that was a lot of money for the time. But then those poor Turks thought that, hey, we live in a historical land. These guys are looking for gold. We should ask for more money. So this became a bit of a problem. And then a bureaucrat found out about it. He gave special permissions. That bureaucrat wanted to buy the land from the villagers so that he can charge more money. So, it got complicated more and more, but finally he got some permits, he shook some hands, and he was still digging, employing some Turkish villagers to dig for more. And one day, early in the morning, they dug it this way. That's why they call it Schlieman's Trench. That goes that way all the way. They found some gold. This was early in the morning. The girl who could speak a few words of Turkish said mola in Turkish. That means time out. So she just said, we totally forgot that this was such a special day for my husband and I, so we'd like to pay you for your all day's work, although it's early in the morning, you can go home. And they got the man was so crazy. He wanted to find the treasures of Priam. Priam, the king, the royal treasures. And he found that gold. Beautiful, so intricate, you can't believe. Maybe if you see those books, you're going to see a photograph. There is a very famous photograph of Sophia, not here unfortunately, the wife, because she wore the diadem and the necklace. 1870s photograph of the wife of Heinrich Schliemann. And the funny thing is, it looks very similar to village weddings. The girls, you remember I told you about the gold coins? The same things would be worn even after 3,000 years. So he thought that he found the treasures of Priam, and he called it that way. And he went to first Greece, then to Germany. And most of these wealth was left in Germany. Maybe I told a few of you about this story. So they were left in Germany. World War II. Don't get me wrong, but there are many countries who would call themselves as the victors of World War II. Russians, as they captured a big part of Germany, they believed that they won World War II, and they captured a big part of Berlin. The treasures were in Berlin. After the occupation of Russians, the treasures disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. That's wartime, who stole it. 40 or 50 years after, a new exhibition was opened in Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. In Russia, they reappeared. And you know what happened? Germans asked them back. They said, hey, you stole it at first from us. We didn't have the Turkish authorities to ask those treasures back. We have got some of them in Istanbul Archaeological Museum, but a bigger part of it, unfortunately, is in Russia, some in Germany, some in Greece. So the wealth of Troy is in different countries right now. The last thing I want to say about this place is one other reason for criticizing this German man who dug this place up, apart from leaving right after he found the gold, is the way he dug the site. We must accept the fact that he was a self-trained archaeologist, and he maybe did not know that this site was continuously inhabited for 3,500 years, from 3000 BC to 500 AD. But what he did was destroying the site actually. So he just opened the trench, just going this way. And he didn't care, well, this is Troy the first, this is Troy the second. He kept digging until he found the gold. That's why today's archaeologists, modern archaeologists, do criticize him by the way he ran the excavation as well. Please follow me this way. The walls that we got here, you remember it's a mount. You remember we started our tour from the other end, and I was pointing at this direction telling you that the beach had to be there, the harbor. You remember, if you read the Iliad, Greeks had their camps. They came by their ships. They had their camp by the beach, by the harbor, and they attacked the city from there. The beach had to be there, and they failed capturing the city, although they even had Achilles, because the walls of the city defended the city so well. So there had to be a trick. If you're talking about the trick, it is always Odysseus. This guy was really very smart, apart from being a very good fighter. So he thought of leaving a big horse in which they would be hiding some of their soldiers. And they would leave it on the beach and they would sail out. But they would be waiting out there for a sign. As you know, they hoped that the Trojans, celebrating the departure of the Greeks, would put that horse into the city, and then they would come out, open the gates, give a signal, and they would sail back to capture the city. All this plan worked well Now the thing that I just said about triggering your imagination is, if the beach was down there, the city was up the hill. Therefore, they had to have some ramps. This is not the only ramp, but this is the ramp that faces the beach. So, if you ask me, that's just a myth. That's just a nice lullaby. That's just a nice story. But if you'd like to believe in the Trojan horse, we might believe that this might be the ramp through which they got the Trojan horse into the city. And you know the end of the story? Finally, Paris sends an arrow and hits Achilles on his heels. So he dies. Achilles dies here as well.
Have a look at this one. Yeah. People sticking their heads out of it.
Of the pottery, the huge storage pits. They thought that it had to be the house of a very rich person. That's why they call it the palace building. Down here we got quite much a rebuilt part. We got some valves down here, but apart from that, those two had to be the altars built starting from 300 BC till the end of the pagan era, until it was predominantly Christian. It had to be the altar. So where some libation and sacrifices were made to gods and goddesses, including Athena, which was one of the main deities of the city of Troy. So possibly some libation, pouring down wine or any other thing to one of them, and the meat of the animals, or burning the wool of the animals on the other one. So the beach being that way down, remember? Today it's filled up so much, and it is so fertile land as we got still the river. I think it's quite amusing to see all those villagers. We got all this history, and everyone is trying to grow their own. Had a bit bigger seating capacity. You see where we got the wooden stage right now? Right over there, there had to be a very big stage building in the back. You can see
Odeon.
those 3 steps. So starting from that wall, it had to be much taller, much higher. And there had to be some niches with the statues of, especially of Roman emperors. One of them is Hadrian. This is what they have found in the theater from the stage building, and this is taken to the city museum. Unfortunately, it is not here today. And they had 2 very similar style buildings. Can you see these blue signs here? Semicircular seating areas. This is the one that we are looking at, and that is the Odeon. Unfortunately, not much remains from the Bouleuterion. Bouleuterion means the city council house. So one is for political meetings, the other one is for theatrical performances or for speeches, mainly. The interesting thing is it looks like quite a large building, but with the help of some wooden pillars, they generally, not always, covered these places. So they could have been indoor, smaller size theaters, in a way. It would be quite difficult to cover such a large area although the building would be covered with marble, the roof had to be wooden. So it's because then you need to have so many pillars inside it, and they don't want that. With the help of some little wooden pillars, they could cover that place. So even in winters, they could have had their place here. I'll ask you to follow me this way, and that's going to be the last thing we'll see before. Very big walls, and it's, you remember I was telling you this was a very privileged city because of the wealth that they had because of their harbor here. It seems like as early as 13th century BC they had the drainage system. 13th century BC drainage system. When you study the history of Rome, where the history is really very deep, the city was founded in 7th century, 8th century BC. I'm talking about 1200, a city having drainage system. So that's why maybe it was not the beauty of Helen, but that it was a very important city at the time, a rich city. Can you see in the middle of the street, the kind of channel with some stones covering it? That was a drainage area. So simply depending on the gravity, you see that the city is a bit higher. So the drainage was just flowing down under the main street of the city from the south gate out. Sultans would be paid their salaries by the Sultan here in this courtyard. And that would be gold flying in the air, a great feast for thousands of people. And a great feast for thousands of people could be taken care of because You see the size of this courtyard? From that corner that you can see to the other corner, that's the kitchen. As we walk further, you're going to see 20 chimneys. We Turks, we're quite crazy about our cuisine and eating. There were more than 1,000 people working only in the kitchen. 100 guys making Turkish delight. 100 guys making Turkish halwa. But you're cooking for, on a ceremony, like 12,000 people, at least. For one day, 12,000. And ladies, they didn't have the microwaves back then. So it took a bit longer for the guys at the kitchen to prepare everything. Unfortunately, the kitchen section is under restoration. So I said next time, so that's one of the things that you'll see next time when you come to Istanbul. Behind me, we've got the Imperial Council House. You can see it's gold, gilt-covered windows. That is the Imperial Council House. Every 4 days a week, the important ministers of the empire would have their daily meetings here, right after the morning prayer, right after the sunrise prayers. They would come here, and the tallest building of the palace is called Tower of Justice, which was attached. It was built just attached, adjacent to the Imperial Council House. And that tower has an overlooking window into the room where the ministers would gather. And that would be caged. So from time to time, the sultans would go there just listening to what the ministers are saying. But the ministers would not know whether he was there or not. So if he knocks down on the window, that person speaking at that moment is driving the Sultan crazy, and he is in deep trouble. So that's, he may lose his head. And mostly people coming here would ask, so where did they live? They lived in our M quarter, which requires an extra admission fee for this place. I know that it sounds great, you know, to see the RM quarter. I do understand that. But if you ask me, what do you see in the rooms? Well, don't get me wrong, but there's no furnitures and no women, because that's what, you know, people hear stories about the RM quarter, about 600 women working here. Later on, I may say a few things about the way of life in the RM quarter. It is just the imagination of the Western people. It's because they were so curious what's going on about here. The word harem means, it comes from Arabic, it means forbidden. It was forbidden for anyone who's not from the family to go in there. So they've never been there, although they wrote so many stories about it. It just triggers the imagination of a man. You got one man in charge and 600 women over there, but they are the servants of the royal family, because there are royal women as well, and they need certain servants. And because of this patriarchal society, you can't have men to serve those ladies. You need the women to serve them. It is true that some of those women at the end became the wives of the Ottoman sultans, but historians do say that maybe only 10% of those women would have the chance to see the face of the Ottoman sultan. So it's today, no furnitures, no women. So what you see is just bare walls, and it's not that appealing. That's what I can say. But it's behind these walls, the living quarters of the ruling family. There is one other room. There's not much to be seen in the Imperial Council House, but there is one interesting room in this courtyard. All the others are closed due to restoration. It's you see that red brick top building over there? That used to be the treasury of the Imperial Council House. It's more like the state treasury in 15th, 16th centuries. Today we've got the armory collection. I call it the boys' room. You just see all the swords and bows and, you know, maces and things like that from 15th and 16th centuries. So for gentlemen, it might be one place to be seen. But what I'd like to do is, going all together, I'll just show you, you know, which rooms are where and what you can see in them, and then give you some free time and let you know about the meeting point and meeting time. So please now follow me. The ambassador took the tulips to Holland. That's the first time a Dutch person has seen tulips in his life, after the permission of the Ottoman Sultan. And they have lost their minds. I don't know if you've been to Holland, if you heard the stories, they had tulip mania. They got a stock market, and it was such an important thing to possess for them. So they had stock market. It was such a big bubble that burst, and, you know, many people just went bankrupt in Holland because of that. And today all the countries would know, all the people would know that Holland is famous for its tulips, and it's correct. But they got it from us, and we're famous for it as well. We just don't merchandise it that well. But if you fly Turkish Airlines, or if you got anything Turkish, like the tiles, like the carpets, you know, you'd see tulip designs on anything, on calligraphy, on paper marbling. It was accepted to be the flower of heaven. And there is, this is a long story again, but Turks, Muslims, not Turks, had one Islamic Brotherhood which gave meanings or numeric values. Let's not block the way so people can go behind us. They gave numeric values to the letters in the alphabet. So you may have a total sum, A standing for 1, B standing for 2. So you may always have a total sum for one word, and that was the same for God, Allah. So they have used it as a kind of symbol for the unity of God. So that was accepted to be kind of a heavenly flower, and that's why they were growing hundreds of different types of tulips just behind the building. It's called the Tulip Garden. There is a tulip era. In early 18th century, one Ottoman Sultan was so into gardening, we call it, the historians name it, as Tulip era. So it's all about tulips for the Ottomans as well, actually, but you know, it seems like people go to Holland more often than they come to here for flowers. Are we?
Trees are these? They look like sycamore.
They are sycamore. Are we all here?
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with the dessert. The thing that you're going to see, the highlights of the palace. I call the other one rooms for the boys, and this is the rooms, I should say, for the girls. There are 4 rooms. The first one you should start from that way. Unfortunately, in the exhibition rooms here, no photo, no filming. Outside in the courtyard, no problem. You may go in from the first one. What you're going to see inside is the thrones of the Ottoman Sultans mainly. You're going to see 4 thrones. One of them is not lit up so nice, but one tradition of the Ottomans is that they had some hanging decorative items. Because some of those thrones had a kind of a top, and from there, what's hanging is a big piece of gold with some big emeralds, rubies, and diamonds attached to it. I'm serious, you're going to see a fist big emerald hanging from the first 17th century throne that you're going to see. You're going to see the golden throne made out of entirely gold. That was a ceremonial throne. And you'll see an old wooden one. And you're going to see another one that doesn't look Turkish, that's Indian. It looks Indian, it's because it's Indian. The reason is Shah of Iran, he captured a part of, in 18th century, India. He had so much of spoils. And you know these kings, shahs, rulers, they are either enemies fighting against each other or buddies exchanging gifts. So he wanted to share some of the spoils that he got from India with the Ottoman Sultan. So he sent that as a gift. The funny thing is, I was telling you about this movie Topkapi. They were trying to steal a dagger. After receiving many gifts from the Shah of Iran, the Ottoman Sultan decided to send them some gifts back in exchange. That dagger was one of those gifts. So they sent it. But when the gifts were on the way, a messenger came and let the Sultan know that the Shah of Iran was assassinated. He was killed. He called back everything. We're talking all about rubies and emeralds and gold, you know, to be sent to someone who's already 6 feet under? No. So that's why we got the dagger here. Thanks God. Timing was good. And you're going to see something else. In every room, they do have a bit of inscription, explanation about the items in Turkish and in English as well. One thing is called an egret. I bet you don't know what an egret is. That's a head decoration. You need to imagine Ottoman Sultans wearing wrapped around large hats called turbans. And they had always a golden needle to go through that, decorated with precious stones, with a feather coming up to the top. So that's called an egret, and you're going to see many nice ones there. If the Ottoman Sultans were still alive, they would have my head chopped off for saying such a thing, but I'd never wear them. They look so feminine. All the rubies and emeralds and pearls and feather coming out. But the thing is, if you're going to college, you can postpone it. That's why we got professional students. If you're studying, I was that way only, not because I wanted to.
He's gonna get tickets. Lisa just right here.
We are in underground cistern. There are approximately 30 underground cisterns like this one, but this is the biggest among them, and the atmosphere is really great, especially inside this one. The problem about storing water occurred after the city became the capital city of Roman Empire, as the population, as early as 4th century reached 250,000. In 6th century, it was 500,000. So they had certain problems about the water. They had to store the water. The city is built on hills. That's another big problem for the water. And the water sources were quite far from the city. The nearest one was approximately 19 kilometers, I believe, approximately 30 miles. And they brought it into the city with the aqueducts. Outside the city, they created some, I'll call them artificial dams. It's because they are like football field, big, open air lakes. That's what they did.